Hey, this is Tom with Buncombe Shinola. Today we're going to be talking about the Minutemen LP Double Nickels on the Dime. It was just the 40th anniversary of this, I think, truly monumental piece of music. In 1984, I guess it'd just be about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, SST Records, run by Black Flag's Greg Ginn, did something very interesting, which was to release 2 double albums on vinyl of 2 of their flagship acts, the Minutemen and Husker Du. I'm more of a New Day Rising kind of Husker Du fan, but I definitely respect the scope of Zen Arcade. I think there's an admirable amount of experimentation and expansion on the Husker Du, and certainly the unified theme is rather impressive. You know, they have one acoustic song, they have one jam that goes on, you know, for almost a whole side, if I remember correctly. But in retrospect, I really think that the more impressive release is Double Nickels on the Dime. 45 songs by the Minutemen. And I think the amount of innovation they brought to their music definitively outshines not just their label mates Husker Du, but virtually every other punk band of the time. But something you don't hear discussed very often is the disastrous first remix, which happened with Double Nickels on the Dime. The first time that the LP was released in what was then the new upcoming format known as compact disc. So this was 1987, which makes it a couple of years after the death of D. Boon. He died in an automobile accident in late December of 1985. I remember it vividly. Me and all my punker friends were on Christmas break from high school when we found out the news. Tried to soldier through. Maybe partying will help indeed, right? To exacerbate things, I missed my one and only opportunity to see the Minutemen in Albuquerque earlier that year. They appeared with Black Flag, who were touring on Loose Nut. They played at the Casa Armijo in Albuquerque on May 25th, which was a gig I could not go to because it was literally the first night of my first job. And I've had a whole lifetime to regret that decision. If I remember correctly, I think 2 of my friends actually made the hour-long drive to see the show in a blinding rainstorm in a early 50s antique truck that did not have working windshield wipers. They even unwittingly met the band at a convenience store trying to find the venue. What I would have given to have been there with them. Of course, I heard reports that it was awesome. And to add insult to injury, when the posthumous live Minutemen collection came out, called Ballot Result, it actually featured a couple songs from the gig I missed. You know, you can't win them all, you know. But I definitely do not want to understate the case. For an obviously smaller faction, but an entire generation of outsider music fans, the death of D. Boon was something felt as deeply as, I'm sure, the death of Buddy Holly with Richie Valens and the Big Bopper hit decades before. I mean, it was our first crushing brush with the finality of death amongst the pool of musicians that we admire and hold dear. And naturally, it became the first opportunity for many of us to, in real time, experience the respect or lack of respect that could be shown an artist's legacy in the years which followed their death. But anyway, on to the CD. You know, in the first rush of promotion for this new format, they made several claims which ended up not being true. One was that the discs were virtually indestructible. I mean, they would show like demonstration clips of people like stomping on them with their foot and stuff and still playing, that they were like unscratchable and they would just practically indestructible, right? The other really galling claim was that after the factories were, quote, retooled, unquote, that the price of the discs would go down to the same or even less than LP prices. And I think we all know how that went. The other really objectionable claim, I would say, is that the format guaranteed a sonic improvement on every release that was put out in that format. And, you know, I mean, something as like well known as the famous run of first Bob Dylan records were put out in like without any remastering. So those sold for years on their budget line in an edition that you could argue probably sounded worse than the vinyl. Years, maybe it was even decades later, when they finally decided they were going to do the basic amount of work that you would do for any popular release, they jacked the price up to full price, even though it probably gone gold in the lower edition and made its money over, you know, how many times. No extra tracks. I could go on and on, you know, but that's just one artist. And there was sort of a presumption that they would have some archival respect for the material. But, you know, when Blonde on Blonde first came out, they cut out a couple verses of the long song, Sad-Eyed Lady. And when Neil Young's Live Rust came out, I remember they cut out part of Cortez the Killer. You're just like, what? You know, when they did like the first two Seeds records on one disc, they left off a song or two from the first record and then didn't even like put it on one of the other releases, even though there was space on them for it, you know, just like put it somewhere else, you know what I mean? Just a minimal amount of consideration you would expect would be due the art was completely not a consideration for especially the majors, but apparently all of the record companies as production in the new format blazed forward. Of course, if you're someone who's my age, you've lived through decades of different formats popping up, and you begin to realize that just the idea of a new format, not the actual qualities of a format, that it become the selling point. And people just tend to buy the same shit over and over, right? I was part of a group of people who were very skeptical, in fact, even resisting buying a CD player. I remember how angry we were at the first releases that started to come out, where the only way you could buy them was on CD and not vinyl. And I know, it's hard to, I know. But anyway, of course, you know, you listen to your punk rock LPs a bunch, they get pretty beat up. Eventually, you kind of welcome the idea that you might own this on a slightly more durable format. And so, yeah, we buy Double Nickels on the Dime, widely regarded as the best Minutemen release, one of our favorite records, just a record you can listen to over and over. And we take it home and we're listening to it and we're just, what the fuck, man? What the fuck? First CD mix of Double Nickels on the Dime, remixed by Mike Watt, no less than Mike Watt. Something I hadn't thought about for a while. The despised original CD mix. Do you want new wave or do you want the truth indeed? So yes, for some reason they let Watt have a stab at an alternate new mix. Of course, Dee's been dead for a few years now. The results are so tragically off target that after they printed the first run of 800 or so, they were just like, no, we cannot do this. Let's go back to the original mix. Everyone just hated it so much. Surprisingly stinging botch. It's been effectively forgotten, swept under the rug. You know, what does it sound like? Well, the bass is boosted a little bit throughout, and elsewhere the drums are slightly diminished. The kick has lost much of its snap, and the snare has lost much of its ring. And worst of all, just the dryly bare, biting overall vibe that is one of the LP's most beloved attributes has been just effectively abandoned. It's not like overproduced, like, you know, a record on a major would be overproduced, but it's sweetened in a way that when it's applied to like D. Boone's vocals or guitar, you know, just seems so wrong. Even just like the slight rock star nudge to the guitar solos seems like an incongruous, off-putting, poor decision. Like one of Raymond Pettibon's piece of artwork cartoons on the LP cover design extols, that guitar solo sounds so far freaking out, I'm gonna take it with me. And you notice it right away, and it just gets more impossible to ignore the further you get into the 45 songs. I mean, at the start of the record, you're just kind of annoyed by it. But by side 2, you just start getting pissed. You're just like, why did they do this? Why did they, like, you know, just shift the tonal quality that we'd all love so much, you know? I mean, amongst our sort of circle of music fans, this record was a modern classic and was thought of such virtually instantly. A few previously buried hidden instrumental details pop up here and there, mostly on the weirder stuff like You Need the Glory and Take 5D. But the hits, such as This Ain't No Picnic, etc., they are close to unlistenable in the new mix. And even when the songs aren't utterly ruined, like The Gloria Man or There Ain't Shit on TV Tonight or West Germany jump to mind, you'll still find yourself astounded how off-kilter every track eventually feels, even with just these few minor aesthetic engineering adjustments. But there's also really blatant lapses, like omitting the last drums of Nothing Indeed, it just seems so wrong, It's bizarre to even to imagine turning a spin of Double Nickels on the Dime into a chore, but just try to make it all the way through to Love Dance. I bet you won't. And oh yeah, did I forget to mention they left off all of the covers. So yeah, you don't get the CCR, you don't get the Van Halen, you don't get Mr. Wu. It's probably no doubt a publishing thing. SST did not want to leave themselves vulnerable to in the more prevalent format. But they also eliminate two of the longer originals for space considerations. Mr. Robot's Holy Orders is George's lone non-jam solo composition. And boggling but true, they leave off Little Man with a Gun in His Hand. What the fuck? Now, and these omissions were only partially rectified in later editions. Side Chaff is truncated quite severely. For those that never had the LP version, their SST always included an interesting message scratched into the inner groove of each LP. The Minutemen Double Nickels on the Dime had been organized as diplomatically as they could, one side per band member, and they all got to choose which songs they prefer to have on their sides, and then side 4 was just, all of the remaining tracks. But anyway, side D, the little message in the opening groove was, Arena rock is the new wave. And side Mike, it said, punk rock is the new nostalgia. Ooh, brutal, man. Side George says, dance rock is the new pasture. And finally, side Chaff, which is the catch-all side, says, chump rock is the new cool. Fuck yeah, man. But anyway, man, we were so fucking pissed when this came out, man. We're just like, you're just resisting this format, and you give it a shot. You just had these suspicions that they would fumble the ball in so many ways, given the nature of this new digital technology. And in the infancy of the format's arrival, my buds scooped up, the records they liked pretty automatically. Double Nickels on the Dime, we just listened in bewildered horror to the dismantling done to one of our beloved faves. And it seriously turned me off of digital players for at least another year or two. It was one of the first CDs I heard, right? And gave a hard consideration. It's just like, I'm not going to buy these ever. It wasn't until a few years later when it became clear that they were just going to stop releasing music on LP that I just had to give in. But yeah, it seriously turned me off for at least another year or two. I basically assumed that every LP to CD reissue was bound to be handled as disrespectfully, and the majors did little to discourage that presumption, busy as they were claiming the discs were indestructible and that retail prices were about to drop any second, whatever. But anyway, going through the record, I labored to find a song that wasn't hobbled by the remix. I suppose One Reporter's Opinion is kind of okay, but the one track it offends the least, probably, is where the sound shift unwittingly matches the parodic lyrical concept of the song, which is, of course, #1 hit song. But, yeah, I'm sure that the intention was not to commercialize this music. I mean, I bet they just thought that they were improving it, but whew, they were wrong. And when it came time to do the second pressing of Double Nickels on the Dime, they made damn sure to let everyone know that they had reverted back to the original mix. I think the sticker even says, this is not the shitty mix. And, eventually all was right in the world. Although I think there were still a couple of weird omissions. At least, you had most of the record in the way it was supposed to be. I mean, it's such an amazing record. Just the poetry, the lyrics really are poetry. And often the title is meant to be an ironic clue as to the exact meaning. The playing is just amazing, you know. I mean, they just bring funk and jazz, just so many things that you never heard in punk music up till that time, outside of, you know, maybe Pure Ubu or outside of Gang of Four, or, you know, just Wire a little bit maybe, but just such an amazing record. And I guess I don't want to be just focused on the negative, you know, here on the anniversary. I mean, it is one of the best records ever, period. That is a period at the end of that sentence. And D. Boon, he shall never be forgotten. And the unfulfilled potential of his loss will remain a tragedy, and the mountain of their accomplishment will remain a triumph. And him and Mike Watt and George Hurley will remain, to me, always heroic. Straight up. The lesson here, I think, is as the decades and years go by, whether it's 8 tracks or it's 4 HD movies for your home, whenever there's going to be the new format, there's a big probability, not possibility, probability that there's going to be some big botching. And, you know, it's as likely to be a disaster as it is an improvement. And don't you fucking forget. All right, there you have it. 40 years of double nickels on the dime. Thanks for watching and listening. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe to follow for future video updates. Feel free to share. And in the comments below, let me know if you remember when this edition of Double Nickels came out and what you thought. Until next time, this is Tom with Buncombe Shinola. Talk to you again soon.